Welcome back. It's episode 7 of season 7. Wow, we have come far. One of the biggest shifts in my life happened quietly. It happened when I stopped seeing my experiences as isolated problems and started realizing how many other people were living through similar transitions silently. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. And I call that the curse of intentionality and the curse of awareness. When we know better, we do better. Hi, my name is Lydia, and I share real stories in the context of transition because change is what happens around us all day, every year, every season, constantly. But transition is what happens within us as we go through all these changes. And many of us are navigating life transitions, small, major, without language, without support, and without realizing how deeply those experiences are shaping us internally. So, this channel is for people who want to live with more awareness. Those of us who want to understand ourselves better, move through change intentionally, and create lives that feel grounded emotionally, not just successful externally. We are very good at that. We mask everything inside, and it's a show on the outside. Well, after living through many transitions, immigration, motherhood, military life, career reinvention, mental health struggles, identity rebuilding, entrepreneurship, and repeatedly starting over while trying to hold everything together, I realized that through those expectations, I started noticing patterns. And so that's why here we name the transitions that quietly shape us. And we have decided that we are no longer just passers-by in our lives. We are in control, we are in charge, we are intentional about how we live. And there's no more just existing. We are going to thrive. So you're in the right place. Welcome. As I became more grounded in my own life, I started paying closer attention to other people's experiences too. I would hear stories from immigrant women, military spouses, mothers, high achieving women who had quietly lost themselves in survival. And the similarities, they were just impossible to ignore for real. So many women were carrying invisible transitions, career disruption, loneliness, identity confusion, isolation, starting over, losing confidence, trying to appear grateful while quietly grieving parts of themselves they had lost. And many of them did not have language for what they were actually experiencing. And that realization affected me deeply because for a long time, I actually thought my struggles meant I had failed somehow. But the more stories I heard, the more I realized this was not just personal weakness. These were human responses to major life transitions. And that changed stuff for me, especially after going through therapy for years and reading some books about life's transitions and deciding that intentionality was the direction for me. One thing psychologists and researchers often discuss in post traumatic growth research, and realize I've talked about post traumatic growth because in other contexts, like in the military, we constantly talk about post traumatic stress. But I believe I definitely went through post traumatic growth. They often talk about difficult experiences, sometimes increasing our capacity for empathy, meaning making, and contribution. And I feel very much that I've gone through that. Well, I don't think it's because suffering is good, but because suffering can deepen awareness. Experience teaches you something that just hearing about might not. And I also think transitions do that too. They change how you see people. You no longer be like, why is that person struggling with a teenager? When you've had a teenager, you will no longer look at them like that. When you've had a toddler, you will no longer, roll your eyes when someone's child is rolling on the floor, literally, like in a grocery store. When you have given birth and maybe your birth was a hard one, you will never, look at someone who is having struggles with childbirth or who is about to give birth like, oh, you're making a big deal out of it. So it definitely changes how you see people, and you become more empathetic, and you become, you know, more supportive of other people. Now I began realizing that what I had gone through was giving me language, not only for myself, but for others too. And that was another transition, a transition from surviving experiences to understanding them. One thing I now believe very deeply is that many people are functioning externally while struggling internally. And I talk from experience, and I talk from a lot of love. Because society has normalized having the appearance of everything is okay. So much so that when someone says hi, you say hi back. How are you doing? You say good. Even though you're struggling, even though you're not good, the auto response, good, how are you? Like, you'd never even stop to think. Right? And because they're still functioning, their pain often goes unnoticed, especially high functioning women. That's just my experience. I have seen it over and over and over. Especially caregivers, especially immigrants, especially military spouses. And because I've borne all those identities, I deeply understand those experiences. And slowly, I started feeling pulled towards conversations around support, community, identity, and emotional well being. I wanted people to know you are not weak for struggling through major transitions. You are human. It almost became my my responsibility to talk about my own experience and to make you feel normal, because for a long time I felt that there was something wrong with me. I was either lazy, I just didn't know what to do, I just couldn't acclimate to stuff, I just had an extraordinarily difficult time, and I couldn't understand because everyone else around me just looked normal, you know? And one thing grounded transition has taught me is that awareness changes everything. I will say this over and over and over. When you can identify the transitions clearly, you stop personalizing every emotional response as failure. And that creates room for support, for adjustment, and for intentional movement. Now, if you have ever looked around and realized other people are quietly carrying things too, that awareness changes you like it did to me, because suddenly you stop feeling alone. You're like, oh wow. And I remember this is how I started. One day I just went on LinkedIn and described my experience in detail. I talked about how I came from Kenya, highly educated with a law degree and a master's degree in international development, and feeling a sense of achievement, and that I really expected that my life would just take the same trajectory. And little did I know that immersing myself in military life, which I didn't understand at the time, would cause a lot of disruptions to me. And I didn't even say transitions, because at that point I just was rumbling, almost like I was venting. And it became something that other people resonated with. I was like, wow, I am not alone. And that began a real journey for me. You know what? Sometimes purpose begins the moment your pain stops being only about you. You realize other people are feeling this pain too. So what am I gonna do? Am I just gonna sit and watch and be like, oh, I'm sorry for your pain, I'm sorry for this? Or be quiet, you start to ask yourself a lot of questions. Well, I did not know it yet, but this was the beginning of something larger, the beginning of wanting to build spaces where people felt seen, where transitions could be named, where identity shifts could be understood, where support could exist without shame. And eventually, that desire would change the direction of my life completely. Because building something meaningful sounds inspiring. But what people do not talk about enough is how deeply building something changes you too. It does change you in many, many profound ways. Well, it did change me. I didn't talk about how I pivoted, but I went into the military community. I completely decided to immerse myself into that world because I had not known what this world was. I decided that I'm going to find out. So a fellowship opened up and I saw it on LinkedIn, and I decided to apply for a fellowship with Blue Star Families. It's one of the military serving organizations. And I was blessed to have been chosen among the fellows, and I learned quite a bit. I learned a lot, and while I was learning, I was also empowering other people and seeing just how much structural the challenges of those like me who were immigrant military spouses were. Looking at what resources were available and how navigating through those was difficult. Realizing how help was available for those who identified as immigrants and those who identified as military spouses, and none that accounted for living at the intersection of both identities. So I took the time to study, and I did a research on the challenges of foreign-born spouses, and a lot came out. The people who responded to this research, mine provided so much insights into what was going on. And then after that, I went into Hiring Our Heroes, which is yet another military serving organization, and immersed myself into direct military spouse service. I was part of the military spouse program team running the military spouse professional networks, and that's the realization that 80% of jobs plus are filled through networks, and starting to learn the corporate culture, the amount of learning I did in those 3 years. Yeah, learning while doing, learning while experiencing, learning while supporting others. It was a whole host of learning that my mind was blown, but a lot came into perspective. To wind this up, I want to say that sometimes experiences that almost break us also become the experiences that help us deeply understand others. Right? I think you agree. Well, if you have ever realized your struggles were connected to something bigger than just you, I would love to hear your experience. And if you're navigating a transition right now, things are not clear, or something is coming up for you, you just want to figure out what the next steps are, or you're just curious, we have a guided transition checklist that I'm going to link below. It is designed to help you identify what may be happening internally to you so you can move through change with more awareness, grounding, and intention. Because right here, that's what we do. We are not just existing, we are thriving. If this resonated, my friend, subscribe, like the video, and most importantly, share it with someone else who might need it. See you tomorrow.